Super, let's see if it works. Yes, awesome. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Yes, as we heard from Alan, all-star lineup tonight. I'm very excited. So what tonight's event is a Sustainable Seattle think tank. It's on alternative housing, which already, Marcella, great question. We're gonna try and work on defining that through this event. And a think tank is basically, tonight it's gonna look a little bit like a panel and a questionnaire, and there's gonna be opportunity for the audience to jump in and really engage, mostly through writing, on what you're thinking about, what your vision of this is, and questions that you have, both for the panelists and sort of in your own process of thinking about this. So with that all being said, thank you so much. Think tanks have grown so much since we started in 2019. We can't do this stuff without you guys. Please consider looking into them, coming to our next events as well. But before we get into that, I just want to acknowledge tonight that one of the reasons we come to these things, and one of the reasons I love hosting them, is because it's about practicing, for me, right relationship in these really difficult conversations. I know we throw that term around a lot, but for me, what that means is feeling that you're neither better nor worse than other people, and both honoring that you have a really unique perspective and that parts of that are going to be really useful, and also taking responsibility for the things that you're learning in this space. So I just want to put that out there as ground, like sort of ground floor. That's where we're coming from. I believe in y'all. I don't think that's going to be a problem. So I just want to put it out there. And I also wanted to say that it's May. On May 5th, a lot of us were thinking about and honoring missing and murdered Indigenous women. I want to bring our minds to that as we think about supporting our Indigenous neighbors, as we talk about that, and also to name the gap that we don't have somebody on the panel right now, as far as I know. Forgive me if I'm incorrect, but as far as I know, that is Indigenous. And so I just want to name that gap. So if there's people here that are Indigenous, please speak up and feel free to speak in the chat. We can invite you to speak and unmute as well. So thank you for being here. But I just wanted to name that and speak that that is a really necessary perspective we need tonight. And I wanted to shout out to Abigail Echohawk, who's doing work on that in our community right now. And I wanted to, as we talk about home and the concept of home and shelter, acknowledge the ancestry of past, present, and future Indigenous communities that are here, who have been sustainably caring for and sustainably living in this place since time immemorial. And part of that honor, part of that gratitude that I want to show, is we're going to talk about, I'm going to donate tonight, and I'm going to invite you all to donate to Naha Ilahi. And I was going to toss the torch over to, yes, thank you. Natalie just posted it in the chat. Go visit them. Their work is amazing. And I wanted to toss it over to my colleague, Damaris, to speak briefly on her work that she is doing with them and is going to do with them in the future. It's very relevant to tonight.
Hi, thanks, Una. My name is Damaris Tavak, and I am Inupiaq. I'm from Nome, Alaska, but I've been living in Washington State for about 26 years or so. Naha Ilahi Fund, they are an Indigenous women-led organization, and they do a lot of really awesome programs. I've actually been a past participant. I earned a permaculture design certificate through them. And it was amazing to be in a room full of other Indigenous women for 2 straight weeks. It was a really great program. And I made some really good friendships through that program. I am also currently working part-time with them on a really exciting project that I'm not quite ready to talk about yet, but I invite everyone to follow Sustainable Seattle and also follow Naha Ilahi Fund's social media accounts, because we'll be announcing what's happening in a few weeks. But I am really excited about the project that I'm working on with them. And I was going to read some things from the Naha Ilahi Fund website, but I kind of feel like Yeah, you can check it out for yourselves and get to know them. They've been around for a while, and like I said, like a lot of their programs are about capacity building. What else was there? Indigenous ecology, like indigenous methods of caring for the land. A lot of programs about food sovereignty. A lot of really great traditional plant medicine workshops, and it's like all of their programs are always like really grounded with working with the earth. So I would just encourage everyone to check them out and either like them and follow them, support them that way, or like get to know them, or donate tonight. They've also in the past year really stepped up to meet the challenge of taking care of people during COVID. So yeah, I think that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Damaris. I appreciate it. Yeah, I gave maybe a little too much of a sneak peek, but get excited. I definitely follow them. Super. So another thing we love to do at S2, as y'all know if you've been to our events, is shout out. Oh, thank you, Nick. I'm so excited about this. This is literally the main reason I'm excited about tonight is everyone here has so many good resources and we just get to copy and paste all these things into our, Google Docs and have them. I'm so excited. So, but one of the things I wanted to say, another resource I wanted to shout out is our amazing sponsor for tonight, Culture Shift Consulting. And Suli, I wanted you to have the floor for a couple minutes to speak on what you do.
Thank you, Una. So like Una said, my name is Suli Moreno. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder and principal consultant at Culture Shift Consulting. And I'm also really proud to be on the Sustainable Seattle Board of Directors. So, I love S2. And I wanted to talk a bit about what I do and how I feel like it's connected to the work that S2 does. So at Culture Shift Consulting, I work on community-centric strategy development and program management. And I've been working in community engagement and communications for many years. And over time, I realized that one of the most important things I can do in any project I work on is just encourage organizations to think about how can they give power back to the community. And I think that creativity, project management, and strategic thinking are really useful skills in my work, but that ultimately the greatest value that I can bring to organizations is understanding how they can work with the community members that have been most impacted by systemic oppression. And it doesn't matter what the goal of a project is. It can be around environmental education. It can be around vaccine access, but the only way to achieve success is for the community to guide our efforts. And when it comes to long-term efforts, I see that the only way for those to be sustainable is by giving back power to the community so that the community can lead the effort. And I was thinking about what I wanted to share, and I thought I'd love to share the story of how I named my business. So last year I went to an event called the Future for Us Assembly, which is a conference dedicated to amplifying women of color's leadership. And one of the themes at the assembly was that women of color are natural culture shifters. Basically, that means that the way that we see the world, we realize that there's a lot that needs to change and a lot that's negatively impacting us, and that we have no choice but to take that responsibility for changing those things. And I felt like I had a name for the thing I'd always been doing. So I went ahead and I changed my LinkedIn headline to Culture Shifter because I was like, anyone who hires me should know what they're getting. And then I was like, it's been there all along when I was naming the business that it should be Culture Shift Consulting. And while I do believe that women of color are natural culture shifters, I also believe that we can all be culture shifters and that we all need to be culture shifters if we're going to achieve our vision of reality. And for me, that's why Sustainable Seattle resonates really deeply. I feel like Sustainable Seattle to me is one of the ultimate examples of doing the thing of shifting culture. And I see it in the way that Sustainable Seattle supports the leaders among us, like the wonderful speakers we have tonight, Carol, Dominick, Devon, Sarah, and finding ways to resource the transformative work that these leaders are already doing. For me, I just see Sustainable Seattle spreading power, spreading resources, spreading money. And for me, that's what a culture shift looks like. So I'd love to connect with any of you who are ready to give power back to the community and shift culture. And whether it's because you think we could work together or because you're just really passionate about the topic, I just love being in conversation with people who share these values. So I'll share in the chat a link to my website, my email, and my LinkedIn. I'm wearing the same earrings on my LinkedIn profile, so you will be able to easily recognize me. And just to wrap up, thank you, Sustainable Seattle, for opening this space to me. Thank you for just doing what Sustainable Seattle does, and I'm really excited for the program tonight.
Thank you, Suli. We appreciate you so much, and your support, it means everything, and we love having you here. Em, I'm going to toss it to you to follow that up.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that's actually a really fluid transition because Suli has already spoken a bit about her interest and the value that she finds in Sustainable Seattle. I am the director for Sustainable Seattle. I work in colleague and in partnership with everybody you've heard from so far, and almost everybody you're going to hear from tonight. We all work very closely together. And this is very much an example of what Sustainable Seattle does. Those of you who aren't already part of, you'll know if you're part of the inner network of Sustainable Seattle. You meet with us and talk to us regularly. If you're just dropping in tonight, welcome. We consider you part of the community as well. We are aligned. We are in this work together. Like Suli was saying, we all have the capability to be culture shifters, and we are all essential in the role and the efforts of repairing and restoring sustainability for our region. Everyone who's going to speak tonight, with the exception of Sarah, who's our outside partner and guest, is connected to Sustainable Seattle, especially through a program that we run called Interweave. And Interweave is about doing just what it says. It's about weaving together relationships, people, initiatives, organizers, backgrounds, resources, all these kinds of intangible things that are out there. We help gel them together. And a lot of the work that we do is partner with community organizers, ground level organizers, people with visions for their own communities, their own work, their immediate neighborhoods. And we help, I like to think of it as accelerating the work that they're doing. The vision is already there. It gets called capacity building sometimes, but a lot of the capacity is already there. We're there to help make it more concrete and get it to the next step. Devon and Carol, who you'll hear from tonight, are some of the Interweave participants. We helped connect them with a program that Nick has been brought in onto. Dominick is a member of our board of directors who has also been working with them and supporting them. So it's a good example of all the pieces weaving together. And if this is something that is really resonating with you, I want to invite you, if you have the means and capacity and you feel like this work is important and necessary, to consider a membership with Sustainable Seattle. I recognize a couple members on this call. Hello, and thank you for being here. Good to see you again. Membership is essentially a recurring donation of at least $15 a month. And it is a way to help you stay connected to this movement, this powerful movement, in a very local way that connects you with like-minded peers. You also get special articles. We do member newsletters and member messages. You get little gifts sometimes from S2. I will show off, if you can see, I have my little S2 cup. It's got a nice, delicate design. It's a bathymetry map of the watersheds of Seattle. It's foldable, it's reusable, it's waterproof. I just throw it in my pocket and take it with me all the time. In COVID conditions, sometimes what I'll do is I'll go to a cafe and they'll just pour water into it. I'm a tea drinker, so they'll just pour stuff directly into it. So it helps me continue to minimize my waste footprint, have a zero waste product, and it's very nice. And you can get a little discount on it as a member. But really what it's about, with the sweet swag aside, is about committing to the movement and the work that is done by the whole S2 community, including many of the groups that are represented here tonight. So we'll give you opportunities throughout the event. Our goal is to get one new member tonight. So if you think you might be them, click the link. Or if you feel like you're on the brink and you just hear this conversation tonight and you're like, I gotta continue to be a part of it, I encourage you to click the link and join the community. I'm gonna toss it back to you, Una.
Super. Okay. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you being here. I'm so excited to get started. So without further ado, I would love to hear from our speakers. If you could just introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, just what you're affiliated with, especially tonight, and just a short and sweet little thing that was good that happened this week. And while that's happening, we're gonna have Carol go first, followed by Devon, and I'll call you out with your order. While that's happening in the chat, if the audience, if you'd like to do the same, just introduce yourself, pronouns, where you're from, and short and sweet thing that happened to you this week. So Carol, you go first.
Hello, welcome. Thank you all for coming today. I'm Rashawnna Williams, and I am the lead consultant / creator of BIPOC Sustainable Tiny Art House Community. And let's see, a thing that happened to me today that was positive. Let's see. I don't know. I couldn't think of anything. I'm sorry, Una. But I think the weather was good. The weather was amazing today. That was like really, really good for me. Yeah. Put yourself. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you for being here. Devon.
Sorry.
Oh, you might have to mute if you're in the same room. Just like mute the output if you're in the same room.
Sorry about that. I'm Devon Midori-Hale. I'm the community engagement consultant for the BIPOC Sustainable Tiny Art House community. And a good thing that happened this week was our team had our office meeting down on the pilot site, and we walked sort of some potential things, and has catapulted like so many more ideas. And so it's just, I can't say much more than that, but yeah, I'm just feeling very excited from that.
Awesome. Thank you. Nick, you're up.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Welch. Use he, him pronouns. I'm a senior planner at the Seattle Office of Planning and Community Development. And let's see, this week, we have some work going on right now to support affordable housing on property owned by religious organizations. And so we've been making what are, for me, a lot of new connections in the faith community. And this week had a few more of those, which is really great. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. So next up is Dominick.
Hey everyone, I'm Dominick. I use he, him pronouns. Super excited to be here. I serve on the board of Sustainable Seattle. I'm working with BIPOC Sustainable Tiny Art House community, doing some land use consulting and other things. And something that has happened well this week, I'd say I've been using public transportation a lot, and I see lots of acts of kindness and generosity on there. So it's always nice to be on public transit. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Sarah.
Everyone, I'm with Sawhorse Revolution, co-founder and executive director. I use she, her pronouns. And a lovely thing that happened this week is that the peonies are blooming and they smell really good. So we already talked about the truck, but there's also flowers.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Thank you all so much for your introductions. Now we're going to jump in a little bit. Each person's going to have a chance to introduce you to some of the projects, either that they've just finished, they're working on, or that coming up in the future. This meeting for me has 3 goals. That is to share resources. In particular, I want the panelists to have a chance to really share resources with each other, to sort of feed off of each other's knowledge and experience, maybe come up with solutions that wouldn't be possible without this particular group. I also want to give all of our audience members really concrete pathways to help and to get involved. Those are 2 of the goals. And then I can't remember the third one, but my feeling is that it was to enjoy each other's company and get some good research done. So I'm gonna make that guess. So in the same order, I'd love to hear from Carol and Devon first, a little bit about STACK for short.
So we have just a mini slideshow for you guys. How much time do we have, Una? Do we have?
Say 4 minutes.
Ooh. Okay.
Very short. That's okay.
Okay. We're gonna go really fast through this, okay, guys? So bear with me. So BIPOC Sustainable Tiny Art House Community. Welcome to SU Think Tank. And
one of the first things that I want to also let you know is that Alex Shahan is our technical one consultant. He's actually also in this think tank tonight. So welcome, Alex. So it's Devon, me, Alex, Emmanuel Roy, who is also on the board of S2, is also a technical consultant with us doing pro bono work. And then our architect is Innocent. And he actually was not able to make it tonight. So, anyway. So the next slide. So what is BIPOC stack? We call it stack for short just because it's easier to say. So when I say that, I'm talking about the sustainable tiny art house community. So the definition that we'd like to come to and basically build some common ground with you before we even start talking about it is this idea that we are in the middle of a paradigm shift. And so we've created an experimental model that looks at and focuses on basically economic development, wealth redistribution, and sustainable living practices that are not only eliminating redlining, but also eliminating this idea that folks need a degree to work in certain positions. So we've also changed the hiring model. Everyone that works with Stack, our consultants, and are being paid a livable wage. And the goal is to even make that wage higher the more money we attain. So with that definition, one of the things that we're looking at is diversity, equality, and inclusion as a part of that model. And like I said, we're also looking at wealth creating. We're also taking into account that the environment in which artists live. So we're looking at how can we actually build an infrastructure that looks at energy, water, solar, our consumption, upcycling and recycling. What does organic food sourcing look like, whether we're building our own permaculture garden or we're bringing in a market in and around the BIPOC stack environment. We're also looking at air pollution and sound pollution. So another thing that we also would like to define is that an inclusive community means creating awareness, right? So that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight, and breaking down barriers between not only economic groups, but racial groups and all of the tension between the other, right? Our model is seeking to be deeply inclusive. So community-oriented, resource sharing, networking, all of that, and fostering friendships like family, basically. Placing artists at the heart of the community. So let's understand the paradigm shift a little bit deeper. And I want to tell you about a couple of things that you didn't know about tiny homes. One of the things that you didn't know about tiny homes is that they're not a downsized model. Tiny homes have the potential to allow low-income folks, single moms, those who have been incarcerated, artists that make a livable wage but can't afford to buy a $300,000 or $600,000 home. This allows access to wealth building, sustainable living, and a co-created community around heritage and culture. And it's not Seattle's traditional homeless tiny house model, because we get that question all the time. Well, who would want to live in that? That is not what we're building. And honestly, those homeless tiny house models, I don't know if they're long-term, right? Like they're transitional, they're not designed for family, they're not designed for a lot of different things. And so that's one of the main reasons we're not looking at that model. The other thing is that we're focusing on sustainability as directly tied to environmental justice. So how is sustainability tied to race? A lot of the conversations that we've been having is this traditional historical perspective from the colonial viewpoint of communities of color being resources, just like the land, just like metal, just like gold, right? And we are trying to break that mold and really look at communities of color as an asset, really look at communities of color as opportunities that have been unrefined, basically. Why have we launched this project? I talked a little bit about that. We're looking at the platform for economic development. And so we're looking at a lot of different things in terms of partnerships. to offset cultural displacement. Yeah. Go. Yeah.
Oops, sorry.
Oops. So tiny homes also have the potential to allow us, well, I've said this part. It can change the impacts of long-term displacement due to historical redlining. Our model can be placed in any neighborhood. And this project also seeks to leverage skill sets of those in our community. So like I said, we're looking at actually hiring artists as consultants, and they go through an intensive year-long professional development model. So they become a consultant, and after a year, they basically are able to start their own consulting firm if they want to, or they can stay with us or not stay with us. Currently, we have 11 interested local Seattle BIPOC artists who have already signed up to buy a house. We're looking at possible new, better futures for BIPOC artists and for others who are hoping to start similar endeavors with tiny houses, and for the city of Seattle. And how are we going to do this? We've currently partnered with many organizations, one of those being CORD, which is Community Organized Resource Development. And it's a group of 25 people of color investors that we are all looking to buy land together in Southeast Seattle. And we've also partnered or gotten funding from EDI, Economic Development Initiative, through the city of Seattle, and also a grant through Seattle Foundation and a grant through Seattle Justice Initiative. And this is the design, the arched cabin design, which is an amazing design, which allows for various sizes, various levels, 1 level, 2 levels. It allows for inside outside design. So each artist gets to actually build out their inside, however they want to have it. It can be put on a temporary foundation. It can be put on a permanent foundation. It can be put on cedar blocks. It can be put on a garage. So one of the reasons we've chosen this model is because it's not a modular home, and it can be shipped to us, and we put it together on site. And that's one of the requirements of Seattle in terms of the land that we're looking at right now. And the other beautiful thing about them is that they last the same, they last the lifetime of a traditional home. And so it allows, and the other huge big piece, actually, one of the main reasons, is it cuts the cost of actually building a tiny home by almost 70%. It's 50 to 70% depending on which size we choose. So a house that would cost $150,000, like $60,000 to $150,000 tiny home, this tiny home can range anywhere from $3,000 to $17,000. So that's huge for us, especially because when we're talking about wealth creation, one of the reasons I chose this model is for the quality of the model, the longevity of the model, and the price point. And we're looking for partners and networks. So if you're interested in community development, come help us activate our site and get involved with us and volunteer in all kinds of stuff. We're currently building our programming around artist residencies, memberships, and a tiny house coalition. And then we're also launching our coffee hours, which are videos around upscaling, around tiny house stuff, around topics around circular economies, anything that has to do with sustainability and art. And we're going to do this through collective power, sustainable business development, professional development opportunities, appreciative inquiry, and systems theories. And now, if you have questions, feel free. Or Devon, if there's something that you would like to add, or Alex?
No, I think we're
good,
quick.
I think that's basically it, Una.
Super, thank you so much.
I tried to go as fast as I could.
You did, you nailed that. That was amazing. And there's a couple questions in the chat. If you, as other people start to introduce, if you want to jump in there and answer some, there's some really good ones. And also keep your eyes peeled on S2. I think we are going to have some connections for you to potentially see some of these, because this is some of what we're working on together. Super. Okay, Nick, I am going to pass it off to you.
Okay, there's a lot in what Carol just presented that actually is, I think, a good segue to what how I'll introduce myself here. there's actually a funny story. I mean, the first way that Carol and I actually got connected was 6-7 years ago now. I was completing a graduate program in planning and had done my final thesis on evaluating gentrification risk across Seattle. And there was, a series of analysis and maps that were part of that. And gosh, I don't actually know, Carol, how you came to find that research, but she created an amazing art project out of it. And long story short, we met up and got connected that way. And Carol incredibly graciously actually gave me that piece of artwork, and I have it now, which is really amazing. And then we sort of did our separate work for 6-7 years and reconnected just a few months ago because, as she mentioned, Carol and the BIPOC Stack team received funding from the city's Equitable Development Initiative, or EDI, which is within our department. And we have a large number of EDI grantees, and so staff in the office manage those. I have a few, and one of them happened to be this one, and so we got reconnected, which is really wonderful. And so I've been very excited to learn about and support the work that she just described. That's kind of that's how we got connected, and that's one part of what our department does and what I've been working on. Another part is land use policy and housing policy and anti-displacement strategies and the city's long-range growth strategy. Those are all parts of what we do in OPCD. And, you heard Carol describe a lot of the issues and challenges that we focus on as we try to chart a different course, a different paradigm, as Carol said, to borrow that phrase, for how Seattle's growing into the future in a more affordable and equitable and sustainable way. So social and environmental sustainability are really at the core of everything that we do. I think we'll get into this probably as we have a discussion tonight, but just to mention a few things, on the topic of tiny houses, we recently undertook several strategies to try to promote what in our technical language we call accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, often called backyard cottages. There are a lot of different terms for this sort of type of small housing, and so we'll probably throw around a few of them tonight. But we've looked over several years at the different barriers that people were facing when they wanted to build that type of housing. Some of those were barriers in our regulations. Some of them had to do with financing and the sort of financial dimension of construction. Some of it has to do with just the complexity of undertaking a development project. And we've made some progress on those things. We probably have the most progressive regulations for ADUs now of any city in North America. We have a new set of 10 pre-approved designs that can help people get a permit more quickly, more easily. And we have a tool where property owners can look up their address and learn about the feasibility of putting a cottage on their site. But also just totally acknowledge we have a lot more work to do on even just ADUs, let alone housing generally. I mean, again, as Carol described, we have a real disconnect in a lot of ways between the type of housing that's getting built in a lot of areas of our city, some of which were and will have been for a long time and continue to be pretty exclusive and out of reach for most people in our region, either for financial reasons or with the history of redlining and racial covenants that Carol mentioned. It was explicitly on a racial basis in the past, and that those disparities persist. We see a lot of housing built that isn't necessarily fulfilling our environmental sustainability goals, large new homes that are not helping with affordability or our climate goals. And then sort of aspects that are harder to quantify, like community and place, where those are, you sort of know it when you see it, but we don't always have a good alignment between the really blunt tool of zoning and land use regulation and those goals. Sorry if you hear my dogs here. I think their mom is home. So I'll sort of stop there, but I would love to get questions as we discuss here on any of those topics. one more caveat, because I know we might get into some of the technical stuff, and Carol and her team have heard me say this before, but some of the barriers that her group is encountering are kind of down in the weeds. They deal with like these technical codes. A lot of the city's regulatory responsibility has to do with, making sure buildings are safe and habitable, especially when it comes to housing. Those things are really important. They can also be barriers when, especially newer folks to the development process are learning about this stuff for the first time. And the caveat here is that's not always my area of expertise. We sort of think at bigger picture, longer range policy level. So I'm very happy always to try to answer questions or point folks in the right direction if there's interest in that. I may not always have the answer to some of those technical things, but yeah, thanks again for being here. I'm sure I've missed questions that have come up in the chat, but I will review and then come back to them.
Thank you so much, Nick. This is perfect. This is exactly, I want y'all to hear what each person knows so that we can kind of have this discussion. The chat is alive. Love y'all. Really good. Oh yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Oh, I was just going to say, I just wanted to respond a little bit to what Nick said real quick. I just wanted to also publicly thank Nick for the work that he did in his thesis, because how that happened was that I was commissioned to do a piece about gentrification, and I didn't know anything about gentrification, even though it had been happening to me. I didn't know that was the word for it. I had been displaced, and I was in the middle of being displaced. And so it's interesting that I found Nick's piece because I was doing all this research, and Nick's piece actually was statistically complete. It just made so much sense to me. So I also just wanted to say that really framed a lot of my ideas also around tiny homes. So yeah.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, and then also, if I know we posted a blog post that Nick did, but yeah, Nick, if you have access to the research, I think people are chomping at the bit. This is a great transition. Dominic, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, hello everyone. I think this is a great transition into land use and my perspective on community land trust. So I guess am living in the weeds of community land trust and tribal land trust policy, not only at the federal level, but also at the state level. I see there's a lot of benefits, particularly around tribal land use, and I'll get into that, I guess, more later. But I think one of the biggest hurdles we face, especially around affordable housing, is zoning restrictions and zoning laws that have been particularly beneficial to those who own land already or who have generational wealth that has built over time. And one of the benefits with tribal land, aside from giving land back to indigenous folks who it was stolen from, is that we can kind of remove those barriers of zoning, and there's a whole sect of different zoning laws that apply to or don't apply to tribal land that do apply to other land. Integrating that model into a community land trust, I think it's integral to providing affordable housing. Community land trust, I guess, in a short term or in a short way, would be giving ownership of community to a nonprofit that buys the houses and gives leases to those who are owning the land. So you own the property for a 99-year lease, and the appraisal for that, or the appreciation for that, is at a fixed rate. That is beneficial for a whole host of reasons, mainly for ensuring that we don't have skyrocketing appraisals in Seattle that we've seen or in other places. And there's a lot more I can talk about, but I'll definitely get into that later. But yeah, particularly around tribal land use in Seattle, there's a whole bunch of folks who are working around a land back movement, and love to speak about that more, but get into that later too.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Dominic. Your perspective on this is really valuable. I think it's really unique, and I think it's going to be really cool to hear how the conversation flows with your particular set of knowledge. Great. So, and moving on again, Sarah, let's hear about Sawhorse.
There we go. Hi again, everybody, and just incredibly impressed with all the both visionary and detailed work folks are doing. I definitely know it takes both ends. I'm going to share my screen real quick because Sawhorse is a really visual organization. So we'll share that and then we'll make it big. But for those of you who don't know, Sawhorse is a nonprofit that teaches high school students carpentry and architecture through community projects. And our model is really simple. We bring in professional carpenters and designers and then engage them in mentoring a team of 8 to 12 youth and creating something beautiful for their community. So our mission is to foster confident and community-oriented youth through the power of carpentry and craft. We offer all of our programs for free, or during the pandemic, we're offering stipends across the board to every student as part of our pandemic response programming. And that means that our job sites are a lot more vibrant and diverse than your average carpentry site. Field carpenters are 99% male and 80% white, but Sawhorse students are at this point over 3/4 youth of color and over half young women and non-binary. We exist in a landscape where there's not much hands-on learning for young people these days. So Seattle Public Schools in the last 25 years has cut all but 4 shop classes, but Sawhorse on the other hand has built 57, and as of Thursday, 58 projects and counting for the community. And in doing so, in our holistic model, we work with all kinds of different community needs. So we've served 800 youth. We're not a jobs program, but we do give youth positive experiences with meaningful careers that can be creative and fulfilling. And it turns out that 1 in 15 of them wants to take the next step into those industries. And with those 57 projects, for example, with our tiny house work, we've housed, or I would say based on what's in the chat, sheltered over 150 individuals since we began that work in 2014. And we've also worked with over 100 community groups. So this is a model that it just intends to bring groups together with youth at the center and then with the impact radiating outward. I would also agree. So we have participated, and I'm here in a housing to talk about some of our tiny house work and wanted to show some examples. I'm definitely with the folks who look at the sort of $2,000 sheds and say, why do people feel like this is okay? I feel like there's so much opportunity for creativity and engagement and also dignified and beautiful work. And since we have a model where we work with youth and youth design and build these projects, we have the opportunity to make them really special and try to get at projects that offer a lot of dignity in a very small space. So unlike a lot of the tiny house work that is being talked about, these tiny houses are not permitted. They're under the backyard shed sort of freedom, which makes it a lot easier to build them because we've been doing some permitted projects and involved more in land use, and a tiny cultural spaces project that's actually re-granting unused pieces of land back to the community through the city. That is a lot more work. But the tiny homes that we've done, at any rate, are meant to really put that work and that creativity into the home itself. So in our model, youth actually go into a tiny house village, or we started this before there were tiny house villages. So at that time, we would go visit Nicholsville, and they would have orientation and really work on their client questions and go and tour the camps and the tiny house villages, and then ask a resident who was self-selected, felt comfortable talking to the students about their experience and what they wanted and what they didn't like about their homes and what they wished for. And so this is an example of a tiny house that was designed and built in one of our all women's programs. It's called the Salish House, named by the students. And yeah, as in the previous photo, it's really trying to bring a sense of warmth and dignity and then uniqueness. So the circle window is a really big desire there. Also through this iterative work, this is our first tiny house that students designed. There's no porch, but over the course of designing, it became really clear that the porch was it was just super valuable because it's a social space, but it's your social space. It's not just enforced. Now you're out in the world, you have a threshold to going home. So that's just a little example of how our work and how design in our work and iterative design in our work has affected, I think, trying to make the the houses more sensitive and generous. Yeah, and then the students are really empowered to go do their own research in the community and work together to collaboratively design a home. And then they present it to residents who will be living in the village or the camp there. So the residents are treated with the utmost respect as everybody, you know, the highest, the best form of architecture that our tiny house programs can do. And then the students themselves are the architects and eventually the builders. So that's our tiny house programming in a very fast nutshell. I would have come prepped with some slides about some of our work with tiny cultural spaces, because it sounds more relevant in terms of land use and sort of a small permitted project, but I would love to engage in that in the discussion. So anyway, a few more pictures of students building. This is a salvaged materials house. At least 2/3 of the materials were salvaged and scrap. So yeah, anyway, thanks for following along. And you can find Sawhorse on the internet. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities, and we'll have some specific ones coming up this summer where you can help us build out our shop. And also shout out Elliot Wolf, works with Sawhorse. He's here. So I would also defer to him on some questions. He's been a volunteer for a really long time, and we're thrilled to have him on staff.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, Carol, it sounds like you have a question. It looks like you're good. Okay. I really appreciate you being here, Sarah. It's awesome to hear from you for our first time hearing from you at our events. So we are going to jump into some questions. I, as usual, have made a list of like 7 million questions that I sent to all our speakers. So I'm going to follow their lead in part. And also take into account some of the questions coming up in the chat. Thank you so much. There's so many resources, obviously, in this chat, not even our speakers who are answering each other's questions. So grateful for that. Please continue. So to get to what Marcella was talking about, one of the things I just want to open up with, we've touched on it a lot, but just in a couple of words, I kind of want to hear from each of the speakers, and you can speak to each other about it, what for you defines just sustainable housing specifically. So that can be a specific and a concrete thing. That can be something more like a value that comes along with it. But just from each of you, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you through your work?
I guess I'll just jump right in because I just have a great answer. I don't know. So when I think about sustainable living or sustainable housing, I think specifically about being in an environment that is conducive to visionary thinking, especially as an artist. It's very interesting to be in a space right now where like the land is polluted, and I know that the water is polluted. They've told us that we have to use filters. The sound, the air quality is polluted. There's always noise. And when I think about like sustainable, that just doesn't seem sustainable to me, right? It doesn't seem healthy. It doesn't seem mentally sustainable. It doesn't seem physically sustainable long-term anyway. And so I also think about community, like what does community look like, and how can a sustainable environment sustain a sustainable community and build that around that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely say, I think building into that circular perspective, the idea that, you know, giving land back to Indigenous folks is like, I think vital in our fight to have sustainable, affordable housing. Like for many of us, this is a 9-to-5 job. And for Indigenous folks, this is like the opportunity to preserve their culture and way of life. So like it's a lot more to them, and we definitely need to center our conversation around, you know, giving land back to them. But I think furthermore, like I guess in a more theoretical perspective, decentralizing our like retirement opportunities and like security around housing from like owning property, I think is vital. You know, the opportunity to retire requires someone to have a, you know, $400,000 house that appreciates, you know, a whole bunch over the lifetime. And that's definitely just not sustainable to have affordable housing. So that's leading back to the community land trust model. But I think something that I'm very happy to see that has been implemented recently is Governor Inslee's signing the law that creates more stable housing for folks and doesn't allow landlords to kick them out after the lease is over from month to month. And there are opportunities to make sure that folks are able to stay in their housing and make sure that they have some kind of stable housing, which is, I think, vital in the fight for sustainable and affordable housing as well.
I guess I can go. Yeah, I think about sustainable housing, you know, and stability a little bit, and sort of the experience of having to keep moving. And, you know, I've just noticed, like, when you have these chaotic, destabilized community environments, like, it produces a lot of waste, and there's a lot of, you know, it's very difficult to live sustainably. You know, when I'm very feeling like stable and supported, it's much easier to make choices. So, you know, I've always had these values and wanting to live that way, but I think it's not just about preaching your values, but like making sustainable living desirable, making it accessible, like especially like financially, like if all you can afford are these disposable things or cheap things, like then if you're a low income person, then you don't really have the opportunity to live that way. So like the moral part of it is just sort of like not really fair, thing. So, and then also more normal. And that's where Carol was mentioning, like, artists being front and center, because I think we can provide, you know, we're very resilient and like kind of adaptable and able to live off of a small amount and also have a lot of drive. So I think, you know, thinking of, that's part of like our mission is centering artists to sort of help be cultural drivers, sort of as Sully was mentioning, like cultural shifters, you know, so yeah.
At the risk of restating what everyone has said, I'll maybe just put some of it into maybe a different framework that is how my brain thinks of it coming from the public sector here. And I guess the sort of mental model that's coming to mind is concentric circles, like different ways of looking at this question of, you know, just sustainable housing. One might be, I don't know if we're starting at the center going out or from the outside in, but one of them, maybe the widest, you know, sort of at a regional sense, is from the perspective of regional growth and sprawl. I mean, we have this booming region, a lot of population growth, you know, for better or worse, but like that's a reality that we have. And the question we have, at least that we think about a lot, is not whether Seattle is going to grow in the future, but how it needs to grow, how it should grow, what that growth should look like, who should be experiencing the benefits and burdens of that growth, which historically has been shared very disproportionately for communities of color. And so, you know, sustainability at a regional scale looks like a lot of our region's growth getting pushed further and further out into areas that are forests and farmland and that involve long commutes on the highway to your job, which is both, you know, horrible for your mental well-being, your physical health, and the environment. Then maybe the next circle, in or outward, is, you know, touching on, I think, what Devon was just mentioning a bit, the sort of ripple effects that housing insecurity and displacement have. Like that's bad enough on its own, but then when you think about the ways that that's disruptive to family connections or community connections, children in schools, public health, or just health and well-being outcomes, all that stuff is so connected that, you know, finding ways to, I mean, including, like, as Devon said, losing artists and other sort of cultural connections, that's all part of housing stability as well. And then I think getting to what Dominick made me think about is, you know, admittedly in my mind, it's sort of it's the long game for us, but we have housing as a commodity in our capitalist system. And I think we have to use half of our brain to think about the ways we operate within that system and get to better, more equitable outcomes. and think long-term about what a different approach would be. Housing is a basic human need, and not to mention things about like reparations or indigenous land and ways that we just think about land ownership and housing development and place in different ways. That would be kind of my long-term vision of what a different system would be. Admittedly, sort of, undefined at this point. We have to start imagining what it could be, but yeah, sort of 3 different ways that I'm thinking about that question.
This is Jody. I don't know what the protocol is because I was gone for a minute. Is it okay if I speak?
Yeah, go ahead, Jody.
Okay. I'm 85. I was in elementary school during the First World War when sugar and shoes were rationed and you couldn't even buy a 2x4. I grew up in a very poor family, but I never noticed because we had a great time. I think that one of the things that would help all the way around is if there were more space and systems for us, for elders to talk about sharing, making do, repairing, waiting until the thing you need comes by, because it will if you wait long enough. And if you ask enough people, someone's got one. And I think it's a marvelous way to build community. And us old people don't have day jobs. And I think there's a lot of that sort of stewardship of resources and time and connections that elders would be, well, not all elders, but a lot of elders would be really willing to share. So I would encourage everyone to put us to work. I mean, what if you had 2 elders for every tiny house village? And people would say, well, listen, I need this thing, or how do I fix this? Or what do I do about this? I bet we could help. And a lot of us would really love to. Thank you.
Sorry about that. We're like switching off sound. Hold on.
You sound good.
Is it off? Is it on? Is it on? Can you hear me? Sorry about that. We keep switching speakers. So it's interesting that you said that, Jody, because I have this really awesome story that also kind of lends into that model. I have a couple of elderly friends that are like, he's like a brother and one is like a sister, an older sister to me, and they basically own their house, right? And one of them, he owns a house that's a tear down. It's completely tear down. But he doesn't want to move to adult living situation. He doesn't want to go to a nursing. He doesn't want to do any of that. He wants to live in his house and die in his house, right? And so he's allowed his son to build condominiums or townhouses in the front half of the house so that he won't be alone and he can stay in his house. Or maybe he will rent one of those and they will redo the house. So it got me to thinking about the BIPOC stack and this idea of not only elders, but also young folks, right? This concept that we expect people to go to places. So we expect people to go downtown to the symphony. We expect people to go to the Seattle Center to take part in cultural events or go to museums downtown. And this model is seeking to actually bring artists specifically to communities and actually engage directly with not only young folks, but elders as well. And the potential or possibility of replicating on a small scale. So say an elder wanted to give their land to us or give a house to us, or they wanted to stay on their property, but they wanted to share the resources. The large house that's on the property could be turned into the communal space. And then you can put 2 to 3, depending on how large the land is, tiny ADUs or the arch cabins, which is what we're going to do, on this. And now you have a ready-made community where these 3 or 4 folks can actually start to build community in conjunction with each other. And in so doing, that ripples out into the rest of the community.
Yeah,
That's all.
thank you. I definitely don't have as many detailed policy ideas or structures about just and sustainable housing, but I do think participatory is a word that comes to mind. You want people to feel agency in their own home, agency in the world around them, and that your house should allow you to participate in your life and participate with others. So that's going to take a lot of different forms in different communities. And yeah, I also had the question of how do we think about housing that doesn't reproduce the existing social order? And that's like a very high question, but so long as the houses are asking this question and these housing formats are continuing to interrogate what's going on, how can they be an interrupter? How can they try to heal? Yeah, those are my two additions.
Thank you. Oh, so juicy. Thank you for speaking up, Jody. I very much appreciate it. I think there's lots of people here who would love to speak to you more about that very concept. So the next question I have is a really complicated one, and I think we've addressed it in a lot of ways. So I think I'm going to reframe it a little bit. And then I have some specific questions for each of our panelists. And we're cranking through our time. So this has been really helpful. And if there's any questions, panelists, in the chat that you want to elaborate on, just hop on and let me know. One of the things that we talked about is this definition of alternative housing, right? And also speaking to, I think we share, or that like a lot of us share a sort of understanding of sustainability, not just as green housing, that's not the only form that sustainability takes, especially in building and I think for me, that's what alternative means, is shifting from an idea that housing is something you can replicate really quickly. It doesn't need to change. It just needs to happen really fast. It just needs to go up and shove people in there. And that's one version, but without some, like you said, paradigm shift. That's kind of, for me, what alternative is. And I'm wondering if if y'all are feeling this similar mindset about that, or if you have other definitions of the idea of alternative housing to what we have now. And that is kind of connected to how do we see the injustice and climate threat persisting in housing right now in Seattle. And if folks agree, that's okay too. Yeah. Cool. I love it. So feel free if there's, also if anything comes up for you or anyone in the audience and you feel you're like, dang, that does not sit right with me, also feel free to pipe up. Chat first, we can invite you to unmute too. So yeah, let me see. What is next? What do I have next? Okay, Sarah, I'm gonna toss this one to you. Specifically, the question that I had for you that I was thinking about is you're talking about people having a sense of agency in their homes. I'm also curious about sort of economically and looking at a sustainable future, what is really important to you about youth specifically? So we're talking about having these intergenerational spaces. Besides getting jobs that have longevity to them, what do you think is really important and sort of helps keep this region sustainable about having these programs for youth?
I think a lot of it is about inviting them into responsibility as early as you can, and not in a heavy sort of like, okay, it's time to work people, but really inviting them into the seriousness of having choice and having agency and seeing your own impact on the world around you. I mean, we're a hands-on education program, so much of it is just about encountering material reality and then cultural reality and asking questions through your materials. And through your hands-on project. So for me, it's critical to engage youth in these questions. And we really start with this, you can see the world in a grain of sand idea. Like just through approaching one house or one project, you can start to question the whole social structure that's really enveloping you. And the more that you, I think, give students the opportunity to encounter that through their experience and through their community, and then work on it themselves. That's the kind of adult that I think is in this room, and that this virtual room, and that also I think is crucial to have in the world, people who can actually interrogate the systems that have caused this world to exist, and who know that with some sweat you can try to make it happen. But yeah, so that's a hands-on education approach.
Totally. Go
I'll
for it.
also chime in real quick too. I've done a lot of work with the youth as well. And I think one of the biggest things, also as someone who just graduated college, one of the biggest things is like climate change is such a huge issue and something that like an individual cannot fix. And I think being a part of a greater community, tackling climate change and having a hands-on approach, not only necessarily a theoretical approach or trying to pass policy, but being able to get into the community and have actionable change that you can go by every day and see, I think is something that's comforting in a sense of camaraderie as we all face this climate crisis together.
Thank you, Dominic. Sarah, one quick question I had was, what is like the number one, maybe existential or social question that comes up with the students? If you're able to talk about that, like, is there like one that they're just like, dang, I didn't realize this? And not to say that they all have the same one, but any that stick out to you that you remember?
It is, since I've been reflecting on our homelessness projects, I'll just talk about those. But I think it, just based on what we hear from students, even years later, the work that they go do in the world, the choices that they make, end up, that was just an incredibly strong impression on most folks, I think that's probably the most important thing. We're very project oriented. So unlike a lot of youth groups, we don't do like extensive personal reflection every day about me. We do a lot more healing through working together and healing through working on a tangible project and making friends and mentors. But yeah, different students are different. I don't know, Elliot, do you want to chime in there?
I apologize. I was kind of in a little chat discussion at the same time. So if you could catch me up real quick, my brain is cross-eyed right now.
Well, the question is, what's the existential question that youth are bringing? And I'm not exactly sure how to answer it. I think they all have them. I also think like sometimes adults like burden them with expectations of having like this beacon question or something, and really they're trying to figure their life out. And
right, I mean, especially in school nowadays, like we said, they've reduced the amount of like woodshop classes down to like 4, and so we're teaching kids a lot of like theoretical stuff. They're not getting a lot of hands-on learning, and it's really hard to do. It's like, I don't care how many books about riding a bike you've read. If you've read 10 books, it doesn't mean you can ride a bike. And so one thing that and there's a certain like sort of like gratification you get when you like build something and you hit go and it works, and you can kind of see it in a physical sense. And so I think we're kind of feeling, I guess, that existential void that the school district is leaving for us right now. Just because we've done a big shift into this. We've kind of gone away from the woodshop classes, back when Seattle was all lumber yards and boat builders, and now we're all Amazon and Microsoft. So we're starting to get more into the computer sciences and less into the wood shops. And so I think, that'd probably be the existential like void that we're feeling with the students is tangible results in a physical world that they can actually like see it with their hands, versus like all theoretical or all book reading.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for answering that. I want to shift gears now. There's a lot of questions coming up about really like tangible, like land ownership. Sorry, big truck, living in Georgetown. Speaking of housing. And I just wanted to shift gears specifically to Dominic and Nick to speak a little bit. Dominic, first I wanted to invite you to speak. And I'm also keeping my eyes on the time. So I know it's hard to keep stuff brief, but I'm going to keep us trucking along because there's so much good stuff to get into. So just sort of concretely, Dominic, what's something in your work that you wish could be scaled up, that you're looking at and you're like, I would love to see this known by more people, practiced by more people, and practiced by, like Nick was talking about, those different circles, right? Those different circles of engagement. And then Nick, I'm going to invite you to reflect on that and see if that's helpful to you as somebody working in the city.
So I definitely say that the community land trust model is something that is entirely underfunded for the amount of work that it does. It has consistently provided affordable homes to hundreds of families. And for example, Homestead Community Land Trust in King County is one of the best and has provided over 200 homes, affordable homes for families for a long time.
And she's a consultant on our team, by the way. I've known her for 20 years. She's amazing. Okay, sorry.
No worries. Yeah. So yeah, community land trust is definitely a model that is not new and is not something that is foreign to us, but is completely underfunded for the amount of amazing work that amazing and data proven work that it can do. And yeah, definitely zoning laws have been providing barriers, physical and policy barriers around infill, providing more houses in an area for a community, and really ensuring that, you know, we can build up our communities to have more access to public transportation and green spaces. I think that's one of the biggest things. And yeah, really kind of decentralizing our perspective around, you know, well, I mean, providing affordable housing in a sustainable way requires overhauling our economic system around the real estate market. And that's a much bigger project than I think any of us are able to take on individually. But I think there are a lot of opportunities, especially in Washington State, as we begin developing a lot of, I think, unique housing models to really be at the forefront of housing and affordable housing that, you know, is on the forefront of climate change and really ensures that we have high density ownership around places that are close to green spaces and community centers and public transportation that has been proven to reduce our greenhouse gas effects. So yeah, I think holistically there are a lot of policy measures that can be taken. I think there are a lot of opportunities to like get involved with community organizations that are trying to develop these different land use models. But I think the biggest thing is really trying to kind of help community land trust to build up more capital to buy these lands and ensure that we can ensure that they're affordable for generations to come.
Okay, I'll pick it up from there, and I will really try to be brief. You know, one initial thing that comes to mind as we're thinking about ownership, home ownership in particular, is, I mean, in my comments earlier, I think I talked about how many things are connected to housing, health, well-being, environmental sustainability, obviously. And another thing that comes to mind here is that, you know, why is it that home ownership is so important and so central to really our, you know, economic system? In part, you know, there's obviously a history that persists today of disparities in terms of who could access mortgage financing during redlining, and that continues today in different ways. But it's also because we, you know, people who are able to enter home ownership, that's the main way we generate wealth and stability in the United States. Not every country or economic system is that way. So it's even helpful. I remind myself that, you know, we think a lot about ways that we could increase access to home ownership, but really it's not home ownership per se that's necessarily the critical outcome. It's the stability and, you know, economic and social security that can come from that, a lot of which we've hitched onto home ownership, but could also be through, you know, all sorts of other social programs. That's not my area of expertise. We won't get into that tonight. But, you know, other things Dominick said that come up for me, you know, that zoning in Seattle, you know, well, zoning in the United States has its origins in really explicit racism. When it began in, you know, Louisville was sort of the first city that had this explicit racial zoning ordinance, and then there were cycles of cities kind of innovating in this really pernicious way and then getting struck down by the courts. And eventually it evolved into this sort of superficially race neutral form of zoning that we have today. Seattle never had explicit racial zoning, but it had since the 1920s and has today the same sort of subtle tools that still serve to segregate areas along sort of race and class lines. And then we also had obviously the period of redlining and racial covenants that lasted for a really long time through the 60s and 70s even, that led to Seattle being a very racially segregated city. And then what we see today is that a lot of the areas of the city where people may want to live, it's just not possible for us to house our growing population because we have these restrictive zoning laws, and there are environmental and climate implications to that too. So I think the main thing I'd want to share here, and in terms of what we can do, there are probably like 3 types of barriers that come to mind in this area. Some of it is the regulations, and the city has a hand in looking at changing our zoning laws and redressing that really harmful history that they have. There are the financial barriers that we've been talking about. That's access to financing. It's the financing structure and system itself. And then I think the third one, where I actually think this sort of group and conversation is most productive, is that the city really can't on our own get this right, in my opinion. Zoning is a very blunt tool. It's probably not where the best grassroots ideas are going to come from, because we are the bureaucracy. So we're really interested more and more in sort of partnering and co-creating with community the types of ideas that help us use these regulatory tools, towards better ends. Really, the original, ostensible purpose of zoning was to protect public welfare. The problem is we screwed that up for 100 years, but it still should serve that goal. And I'll just end with the invitation that that's something our office is really looking at right now, is to find new ways to use those tools to support projects like Carol's and other sort of community-driven efforts to combat displacement and increase access to opportunity and stability and well-being.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Dominic. Carol, go ahead. You had an idea that you wanted to share.
I just wanted to jump in around, I just wanted to put this out there as a paradigm shift for folks, and to maybe shift your thinking around density when it comes to like apartments and stuff. So one of the things I always think about when I think about stability, yes, a home that you actually own on land that you own could possibly create, stability, right? When I think of apartments, I think of our entire culture is based on this notion of moving every 3 to 6 years. Is that really sustainable? Is that really like a model we should be sinking all of our money into? And so we've been doing this for decades now, where people are mass migrating all over the country and constantly moving. And now all of a sudden in the past 2 years, well, not in the past 2 years, but I think people are waking up and actually physically feeling the effects and seeing the effects of climate change. And so now in the past 2 years, now we're seeing mass migrations in and out of certain areas of our country, right? Where we thought this would never happen. And so I'd like to just like throw that out there as a thought, because most people don't talk about apartments like that. They think, okay, well, we're building 100, 300 person apartment complex and we're going to house everybody, right? But in realistic terms, what percentage of those people are actually going to live there till they die, right? Like most people are going to move in and out constantly. And how do you create a community like that? How can a community sustain itself that way? Especially if the underpinnings of the society is not based on you actually sharing and building collectively, and like having an apartment complex where people come together and resources are shared. And in terms of alternative living, a majority of my experience has been alternative living. And one of the things that I'd love to just throw in there in terms of hope, I actually live in an alternative building now, although everything I just said is true about the environment being polluted. But in terms of people resources, when COVID hit, the first thing that people got together and did, they started a food bank in our building. And so our kitchen in our community center is basically a food bank. There's a refrigerator and all kinds of so there's so much possibility. And I think if we shift the glass from half empty, thinking that we don't have the resources, we don't have the money, we don't have the stability to make any of this possible, if we switch our thinking to actual alternative thinking that has been around for a long time, and we've had numerous models, numerous examples, that to me is the glass half full? And it generates more fullness, more everything, right? And so that's one of the reasons why BIPOC Stack is deeply invested in collective ownership models and sharing and resource developing within a colony, basically like a swarm, you know? That's it. Sorry, Una. Thank you.
That was perfect. That was totally perfect. So what we're doing, I'm looking at our time. And so before people have to start heading off, I'm going to pull a little facilitator trick and see if I can do this. I have something for all of you who have joined us. I have a little questionnaire that is going to support us at S2 and also specifically the BIPOC Stack project. It's just a couple of questions that I'd like y'all to go through and just think through. Put your questions in there, put your thoughts in there. We're gonna keep it in archive. We're gonna think about it. You're welcome to email us about it. I am gonna, Natalie, I think you have the link for that. If you could pop that in the chat. And so I'm gonna do a couple different things at once. There's 5 questions on there. 4 of them are open-ended. 1 of them is like a scale of 1 to 10. If you're overwhelmed, you can't hit all of them right now, save it till afterwards, and just hit that 1 to 10 for sure. But definitely fill this out. This is going to help take down some of the notes of what we're talking about tonight. It's going to help us, like this, to me, this is the work, right? Like having Nick in the room, having Dominic in the room, having Devon and Carol here, and having Sarah here. The purpose of this is to forward this work, not to have a theoretical conversation. I want y'all to be connected to each other. Jody is a resource already. She has said so herself. Like, we are all resources for each other. And the reason we're having this, and like, I'm so excited about it, is because things can spring from here. So this little questionnaire is part of that. Yeah, emails. I love it. Yeah, get in touch with each other, please. So Natalie, if you could just pop that in the chat, if you have it's a little Google form, let me know if you all can access it. And then the other thing I'm going to do 3 things at once here. I promise we can do it. I'm going to share my screen. And there is this thing called a Mentimeter where we're all going to generate this word cloud together. So you'll see it in just a sec where it's going to pop up and you will see, oh, it's going slow, but you'll see that it's a process of envisioning something together. So we're all going to look at that together and watch that generate. So you can pop in there when you're done with the questionnaire or pop in there first. So let me just get that shared for y'all. Great, I love it. Okay. So let's do it. Okay. Here we go. Oh, sorry. Dishes are falling over here. Okay. So can y'all see that? Can you see this screen right here? You see this little Mentimeter? It should be like a gray. Yeah. So there's a direct link that Natalie's going to post in the chat. And there is also right here, you can just go to menti.com and put in that code. And things are going to start to generate. You're going to start to see the answers to that question populate. So there's those 2 things happening. There's the questionnaire and there's this. I've been asking a lot of y'all. We've been chatting, we've been answering questions, like everybody's working overtime and I really appreciate it. It's a lot to take in. Garden, yes, first thing, I love it. So this is, for me, part of my practice as a facilitator is to, oh wow, this is gonna make me emotional. I knew that was gonna happen. Oh my God. For me as a facilitator, part of integrating this knowledge and all of what we've been talking about is having a vision ourselves and bringing it back into our body. So kind of like Sarah was talking about, world in a grain of sand, right? For me, the body is a grain of sand, and like being able to kind of take in some of these ideas and visions into the body. Oh, this is rad. I will share this image also on our various things so that y'all can see the end result of all of the things that are on here. It'll be in our Green Drinks group. It'll go out in our newsletter. It'll go out in our response email. So just so you know. As this is happening, I want to offer this moment to the panelists. If you have any specific, like really specific things, hurdles that you're running into, and you'd like some camaraderie or to ask advice of each other, I'd love to just give you the opportunity to do that now while we're all in the virtual room together. If you don't, you want to connect about it later, that's all good too. After we talk about that, we're going to talk about the reminder of all the concrete ways people can get involved. Nick, I know there's something coming up with the city. I know there's volunteer opportunities with most of you. Dominic, I'd love to hear if you have anything. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear if y'all want to ask each other advice or connect over anything.
Well, I'm probably going to reach out to all of you. So really, really grateful to meet you all, and just for all the like incredibly detailed and thoughtful work y'all are doing. It's just amazing to see people following through. I know through experience that it takes a lot of sweat to do even a little tiny house. And so to actually really push on these systems and go granular and visionary, like I said at the beginning, just appreciate y'all.
Hi, sorry, bad timing. Sorry. So I'm Brad Griffith. We build lighthouse shelters. I'm in Sequim, Washington. So what you experience, I have played, lived, and worked in Seattle when I was younger, and I have real passion for Seattle. So what you're experiencing in Seattle, we're experiencing out here. Land is so expensive. It's just crazy. And as more people move from the city out here, it gets more expensive. But there is still opportunity out here. Bring us your people. I'm teasing. Thank you very much. I have to run. And Sarah, I love Sawhorse. Thank you. I'll connect with some of the others too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Brad.
Una, if it's okay, I'll sort of take things a little bit out of order because I do want to plug something that you mentioned, and I have a hard stop right now at 7. Part of what our office does is steward the city's comprehensive plan, which is, some of you know probably a lot about it, some of you may not, but it's a 20-year roadmap for Seattle's future. It covers certainly housing and issues around equity and displacement, but also transportation, environment, all sorts of issues, and really sort of every facet of the city government. And it's been around since the 90s. We update it periodically, and we're just about to embark on the next major update with a real opportunity to chart really a different vision and put some of these big picture goals and ideas at least into the conversation, and frankly for you all to push the city to consider those things, and maybe they get adopted into the comprehensive plan, which is often the first step for something to really become implemented. It feels like it takes a long time, but it's an important first step. So I put in the chat a link to our department newsletter. That's one of several ways you can, expect to hear updates on that. Email me directly as well, but would love to have you all engaged in that process.
Thank you so much, Nick. That is a huge deal and a wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much for all of your thoughts tonight and your help, and for being our city representative for the moment.
I kind of want to chime in just to say something real quick, if that's okay. I just wanted to say how kind of excited I am about this model idea of the tiny house living sort of thing. I recently made a change in that myself. I'm third generation Seattle. My grandma grew up, or my mom grew up on a chicken farm. Othello Park used to be the cow pasture way back in the day. Now it's a massive city with a train station. I've been a developer in South Seattle. I've been in the construction industry for about 20 years, and I've been building new houses in my old neighborhood up in South Seattle. And me and my wife recently decided, instead of taking on like one of the houses that I built, because of course we're only allowed, basically we have to build giant houses to make up for the land and bank costs in order to make it so that we can actually turn a profit. Otherwise, I don't build for free. It's just not what I do. And so, rather than kind of doing the hustle and doing that, we decided to get a small house. So we found a tiny house in Beacon Hill. It's only 800 square feet, and it's me, the wife, and 2 kids in it. We're tucked away on a 3,000 square foot lot hidden behind another house with our tiny little garden. And it was just, it had to do with like a sort of a what you want, your desires had to change sort of thing. You had to, our goals and expectations, we grew up thinking you wanted a house with a picket fence and 2.5 kids and a dog. And we were promised that. And then eventually a big reality stick hit us and went, you know what, let's kind of simplify a little bit, relax a little bit. I kind of want to touch a big shout out to what Jody was saying earlier. If you need these things, just wait, your time will come. Like if something's wrong, take the time, fix it yourself. And there's really kind of a lot to be said about that. It was really relieving to break free of that. And I love this model because this follows that model directly. These places you're building are like same as what I'm in. So it's great. But yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out for that. I love this idea.
Thank you, Elliot. So that's really, really helpful. Yes. Okay. The little birdie just whispered, we got our goal of getting a member. So if you want to jump in and help us get over that goal, do it. It's worth it. We'd love to have you. Thank you all so much. I also wanted to just give this opportunity for Sarah and for Carol. Again, Carol, we put some links in the chat, but ways that we can get involved with you guys. There's volunteer opportunities. And then after we hear from you, I'm going to do just a little shout out about ways you can stay in touch with us and stay involved and stuff that we have upcoming. So yeah, just going to toss it over.
All right. Well, for folks who want to get involved with Sawhorse, we have volunteer forums on our website and a volunteer email. And then especially this summer, July, Mondays through Thursdays, we're going to have work party days at our new shop and office space. So just working with students, building it out. Elliot's there right now. You can't tell how much work it needs, but it's a lot. So we would love that. It's been hard to have a bunch of volunteers during COVID. We're also going to be building a shed at Danny Wu Gardens this spring, or early or late June. It's hard to tell what season it is anymore with COVID, but yeah, we will need volunteers, consistent volunteers during the week. So if folks have extra time, Danny Wu has been really affected by the pandemic, and we're really excited to be going in and helping with that infrastructure in June. So go to our website, sawhorserevolution.org. We also post the most on Instagram, so I'll pop that in the chat as well. But thanks, everybody.
Carol,
Hello,
do you have some?
thank you.
Yeah,
So, am I echoing? No, okay, good. Thanks, Una. Devon just put the link in the chat box, which is our website, and you can basically go there, and our contact info is on there. She also just put our email address in there, so if you want to connect with us via email, that's awesome. I love to do coffee or lunch. That's my way of networking. So if you want to go get some coffee or some Joe, or go sit at the park at the water, have a meeting, I'm always down. Right now, we are actually looking at onboarding our artists, and so we probably won't need a lot of volunteers until June or July. Our goal is to actually order our first 2 to 3 tiny homes either in June or July. And once they get here, we will start doing community like builds, community information, community, all this stuff. And so we will be needing volunteers in about a month and a half to 2 months right now. We've hit the ground running is basically what's happening right now. And it's so many amazing things are happening, and I can't wait to share with everybody. So definitely, send us an email, check out our website. If you are committed to volunteering, let us know. We have a link that is a connection link. I don't know if that's in the chat box, but we can put that in there as well.
Yeah, I'll put it here again.
Yeah, so Devon's gonna put it in there. again, just to make sure folks, yeah. So we also have a contact form. So if you are interested in donating land, if you're interested in working with us directly, volunteering, or you're just an artist or you know an artist that wants to buy a tiny home, this is our contact form for all that stuff.
Thanks, you so much. You're so welcome. Thank you all so very much. I'll be here for a little while if people want to talk more. Marcella, just shout out to you for all your awesome questions. And Elliot, thank you so much for your engagement. Everybody who's been talking in the chat. I'm going to copy and paste all of it. I'm going to get an eye on it, see if there's things we didn't answer. Again, I'll be here for a few minutes. I want to shout out, we have a really cool event coming up, which is the last in our housing series, the last in our home series. Again, different things. So that is going to be what's called Sailgating in June. It'll be on June 8th, and it's going to be in South Lake Union. It's a socially distanced land and water event, and it's going to be all centered around our waterways here as home. And so we've been talking a lot about land and land ownership and land access. Now we're going to be talking about water, and y'all don't want to miss this. It's so much fun. There might be some treats there that are going to be very exciting. Come be out in the sun, come be socially distanced, hang out on the water if you want. We'd love to have you there. That's going to be our big summer soiree. And thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to toss it at the very end to just to Em to talk a little bit about our future stuff that's coming. And there's also that membership link in the chat. So please, if you felt moved, support this work. Go to people's websites. Throw coins where you can. We need you. So.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm crossing my fingers to remind myself I'm going to preview what's coming up and also return to a question that I saw in the chat that I just want to lift up and highlight. So bring it back to the panel, those who are able to stay. Thank you so much. And also just want to follow up with Una. We shared the donation link for BIPOC Stack. I can't say everybody who's on the chat, but Natalie, if you're still here and could share that again, or Devon or Carol, please support their work as well. It deserves to be supported. They are phenomenal drivers in the region. So some of you may know that Sustainable Seattle hosts the Sustainability Leadership Awards. This is a series we've hosted for over a decade. We understand leadership to be something that, so leadership being two things. There are people who kind of are putting themselves in groups. We can define leadership as groups as well, and collectives of people that are taking risks, that are putting themselves at the forefront, that are inspiring others, that are comforting others and nurturing others. This event is designed to highlight and recognize that and acknowledge it, and also increase the visibility and reach of it. But we also understand that leadership is very individual and that we all have an own leadership. And so the way that we structure our leadership awards, we almost cautiously use the word award. We do want to honor this work, but it is also designed to cultivate and understand our own connections and relationships with leadership. And so we use storytelling as the heart and anchor of the event, and the leaders are all nominated and selected by community peers. S2 facilitates it, but we don't select the honorees. We're just here to be a facilitator, kind of like the space tonight. And we accept all the nominations from the community. So Natalie, can you, yes, thank you. Natalie popped the nomination link in the chat. You could nominate folks who really inspired you from the conversation tonight. Think about other folks within your community. Think about folks who are just, beacons for you in this world and in this work. The comment in the chat that I wanted to highlight, Jessica, if you're still on the call, I know your schedule was tight, so you might not still be here. I think you're still here. I couldn't find it when I was scrolling back, so if you're still here and can help clarify, I'm going to try to do it from memory, but you had a question for the speakers about how their work is specifically impacted by climate change, and understanding that cities have not really done what was needed to be done to curb the effects of climate change. How are you feeling it? How is it showing up in the work that you're doing, and how is that affecting you?
And I think it's showing up for Sawhorse in one way, in the price of lumber. I also don't feel strongly that it's only cities. I mean, I think it's obviously a huge, enormous global system, but yeah, just the sort of commodity market and the way it's fluctuating really hard. Also back to the youth question, yeah, we've definitely toyed around with just the idea of like, sometimes you have to learn how to build your own shelter, period. Like that being able to actually produce shelter is a fundamental need. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it's good to know. So yeah, those are a couple effects that so far we are experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, I guess not to get in the nitty gritty of policy, but particularly around housing, it's difficult to really enact strong policy around climate change that helps with mitigation for folks to move out of their areas. I went to school in UC Santa Barbara, had 3 huge fires in 3 years and had a mudslide, and absolutely no one wanted to move out of their house. And a big issue for cities that don't want to really produce data around climate change because of home appreciation and depreciation because of this information. They can get sued. There's takings clause. So a city can't take a property without paying a due amount. A lot of issues around it. And I think climate change is obviously a factor in city planning in general. But more specifically around housing development, high density is necessary, but no one wants to look at high density housing. A lot of things, a lot of factors, and the folks who get to have a say in where high density goes are folks who have a lot of money and want to keep their zoning laws the way they are. So, you know, climate change is something that we need to confront, but there are a lot of systems that kind of bar us from doing as much as, I guess, is necessary.
Carolyn, Devon, do you have anything that's coming up for you? And also welcome at this point. We're kind of after hours now. We call it the linger space. So obviously we really appreciate the featured speakers that are here. But if there are others here who also haven't answered this question, how is climate change showing up for you? Perhaps your own housing, your own relationship to home. How is that showing up?
Yeah, I could answer that a little bit. How is it showing up for me? It's very challenging because in the past probably 6 years, I've watched probably 80-90% of friends and family leave Seattle, and the majority of those people are leaving not only the city, but they're leaving the state. And so I already have my mother, my dad is dead. I don't have brothers or sisters. I think I have 3 living uncle and 2 aunts left, and they live in Chicago. But I grew up here, so I don't want to move to Chicago. You know what I mean? Like, it's not my thing. And so when I think about climate change, I think about the effects of being left alone in an environment that is unhealthy, not only for me, but for my kids. You know, thank God my kids don't live with me anymore, because I wouldn't want them to be living in a building. So when I think about it not only systemically, I think about it how it has affected my life deeply. There are times where I've had to move where I didn't want to move, but I had to because my rent was raised like $200, right? And then the same thing with like sustainability in terms of being able to like have family or friends around you in your vicinity and be able to like not have to do Zoom or whatever, but like close proximity is huge. And I think when we think about sustainability, we do not always think about the impacts of what happens when gentrification, displacement, or redlining actually enter into a community. Like I said, I grew up here, and I have seen, I told Em, I went to the last leadership awards and I got lost in Lake Union because I couldn't, even though the street names were the same, every single building down there was different, and I was so confused. And I walked around for an hour and missed the entire award ceremony because of that. And the same thing that's happened to the Central District and Greenwood. Those are the two areas that I grew up in. And every place I've ever worked in the Central District is gone. They tore all the buildings down. The place I went to go buy my hair, the place I went to go buy Black food at the Red Apple is completely gone. I don't even know where to go get African American food anymore. Like, you know, I don't think they have ham hocks in Seattle, you know? So anyway, these are the things that I think about when I think about sustainability. I think about access to food. I think about access to resources. I think about access to like clean air and a place where I feel comfortable laying my head at night, you know? So to me, sustainability is not just about let's go recycle or let's, you know, stop driving a car, or I'm not thinking, I mean, I am thinking that far because I'm a global thinker, but I think in terms of this particular question on a more personal level, I'm affected by it every single day. And every single time a family member or friend chooses to leave the area, I'm affected by it. And my community is affected by it because we're all spread all over the place now, you know? Anyway, yeah, that's my answer, Una.